Hello and welcome to the GPFans F1 season preview. The 2025 season is set to be the closest, most competitive, most entertaining season in F1 history. And today we're going to break down several things as we get ready for the first race of the season in Albert Park. The season has so many narratives heading into it. We have Lewis Hamilton in the red overalls. Can Max Verstappen tie Michael Schumacher as the only people to win 5 straight championships? Well, he's going to have plenty of competition if he wants to do that, because he's going to have some people like Lando, Norris and Charles Leclerc, or maybe somebody else we're not even thinking of, going for their first F1 championship in their careers. To talk about that and more, including the rookies and how they're going to get on, I'm going to be joined by 2 members of the GPFans community, Nicholas and Sam, as we launch and discuss what is going to be a thrilling season of Formula One. So to start, I am joined by Nicholas, one of the members of the GPFans community, and he's going to talk through some of the biggest storylines that we will see in this 2025 season. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited to talk about all these narratives.
Yeah, I mean, the season's round the corner now. I'm so excited. Albert Park's always been one of my favorite races. Just the wake up time's kind of the difficult bit that I really struggle with. But as soon as you start to see the cars going, the lights off and away we go, I feel like the heart will start pumping, the blood will start flowing, and I'll be awake, wide awake.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, I still have to convince myself to get up at 5 my time, 4 your time, which is even more extreme. But yeah, as real F1 fans, we'll be there. We'll be there.
Yeah. So what do you want to start with? What do you reckon? Let's go with the biggest narrative piece this season. I think I could guess what it is, but you tell me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure even how much time we have to actually speak about this, because we have been speaking about this so much. But the biggest narrative is obviously Ferrari and how Lewis Hamilton is going to fit in at Ferrari. But the biggest part of it is, I think, is the tussle between Hamilton and Leclerc, and who is going to end up on top. Is this going to be a Alonso Hamilton 2007 repeat? Is this going to be a Rosberg Hamilton situation, or will they kind of fall into place, play the team game, and will there be a clear sort of number 1, number 2, or even number 1.5, number 1.5? That is the most sort of exciting part about the season. Hamilton's never been number 2 at any team he's ever been at. Yes, last year was probably the first time, maybe you could argue 2011 with Jenson Button, but probably the first time it was comprehensively beaten by his teammate, George Russell. And how will he bounce back from that? Because in my books, anyway, I have Charles Leclerc above George Russell in terms of a driver. It's a new team. It's a new country. It's a new engine as well. Hamilton's never driven with anything but Mercedes engines in his entire F1 career. He's never moved away from the UK in his entire career. These are all things that can make life a little bit more difficult for Hamilton. I'm not expecting him to hit the ground running, but the long game, the whole season, that is the interesting part. That is the main narrative. Is Hamilton back, or are we seeing a continuation of last year? Is he going to keep dropping off a little bit by little bit? Is he no longer an exceptional driver, but just a very good one? Or will we see the Hamilton of old again?
I think that's the key thing, is like, will we see the Hamilton of old again? Is he still going to look like he was last year? Because I think the main issue he did have last year was his qualifying pace, and he ended up against arguably the best qualifier on the grid now. And if he does not have that qualifying pace, it's going to be hard for him to beat Charles Leclerc when he's going to be constantly starting behind Charles Leclerc. And we all know the teams will naturally gravitate towards who is winning races and who is finishing ahead of the other person. And if Leclerc is starting ahead of Lewis Hamilton, more often than not, unless disaster strikes, he's going to be finishing ahead of Hamilton. So it's I'm curious to see how much the change does impact Lewis. He looks so happy, like happier than we've seen him in a very long time. I'm talking probably pre-2021. He looks like he's smiling 24/7. And maybe he really did need a change in atmosphere. Maybe I'm underrating how much a change in atmosphere, a completely new place, a new start, a fresh restart can impact a person. But yeah, no, I think it's going to be interesting to see how their dynamic does change. I think the thing I kind of compared it to was Sebastian Vettel was so happy being Leclerc's teammate, and then by the end of it, you were having the Brazil crash, and it became a bit more, not hostile, I wouldn't say, because I do think they still have great respect for each other and were great friends, but on the track, it started to get quite chippy, and
absolutely,
it wasn't as smooth as it once was. So when push comes to shove, I want to see if them two are still smiling next to each other. I want to see how it happens. I want to see how Lewis, who you don't get 7 championships without being a fierce competitor, can handle if he's been beaten, or how Charles Leclerc, who has never been beaten by a teammate he has once by Carlos Sainz.
By Sainz, yeah. I mean, he's never been comprehensively beaten, yeah.
Yeah, if that does happen, how he is affected by it and how it affects him. Because this season is a big one for Leclerc. I think a lot of people, it's going to be a measuring stick. How good are you? A lot of people talk about, I think he's the second best driver on the grid. So him going up against this 7-time world champion, who a lot of people think has the potential to get his 8th world championship. Compare Leclerc to him. I think you either see him sink or you see him float. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for Leclerc as well, he'll probably see all the attention Hamilton gets, the time feature, all the TV hits,
the contract.
He gets. The contract, I was going to say, is earning 3 or 4 times more than Leclerc. Leclerc probably thinks, hang on, I'm here as well. I've been here. This is his 7th season off the top of my head at Ferrari. I'm a force to be reckoned with as well. So I think both drivers could maybe have a real chip on their shoulder this season.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what else are you looking at this season then?
I mean, I am a big believer in Oscar Piastri, and now that McLaren have set themselves, they don't have any more excuses to not win both championships, because they are by every measure the favorites, at least at the start of the season. Max Verstappen said on Friday to media, we were there as well at GPFans, he said, I don't think we're in contention for the win in Australia, at least, and for the first couple of races. How are they going to deal with that? McLaren internally last year, I was not convinced at all by the way they went about things, by the way they went about who is ahead of who, can we fight, the papaya rules thing. I wasn't a big fan of. Oscar Piastri, I'm expecting big things off this season. I'm expecting to take a leap forward. Famously bad at starts of seasons. Will he finally sort that out? Will he actually take on Lando Norris? And will they sort of cost each other at the end of the season? That is the second biggest narrative of the season, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely is one of the bigger ones, because, I mean, last season, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris's head-to-head in qualifying was 20-4 in favour of Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri needs to make that a lot closer. Like you said, I think the start of the season for Oscar Piastri was, 1, some races he was just not there. 2, there were races like Miami where that was just unfortunate. He could have easily been the one that was winning that race. He was ahead of Lando Norris before the crash with Carlos Sainz. And then obviously he dropped back. Sainz gets a penalty. So there were races like that. And there was the races where he did just have a bad day. If he can fix that, he can definitely be closer to Lando Norris, because I do think his highs were as high, if not higher, than Lando Norris at times that season. I think Baku was a great race by him. Absolutely impeccable overtake. On Charles Leclerc, that was brilliant defending as well. Sometimes I just love how he defends as well. So I do want to see him take the fight to Lando Norris. If they are closer, it'll be interesting to see how McLaren handle it. I think that's the key thing, because there is no way, Ferrari did improve last season greatly, but there is no way McLaren should have been in a title fight with Ferrari, considering how long their car was that good for. Yeah. Ferrari at the start of the season had a car that was good on specific tracks. They were good in Australia. They were good in Monaco. They were good in just here and there in, Jeddah. They were good in Jeddah. Unfortunately, Carlos Sainz wasn't there for that race. But McLaren had the more all-rounded car. But they lost so many points from so many silly things like the papaya rules, which might be my least favorite phrase in F1 history. genuinely, they need to make sure that they have the experience now, though, as a team. And you could tell that was a team that didn't have experience fighting at the top. They were getting nosebleeds. They were too high up. So now, hopefully, they have that. But if those two drivers are battling now and there isn't like a 50-point gap between them, how do they manage that? Because that's the key thing. Do they make a call early? Lando Norris, we're putting it all on you. Oscar Piastri, you're putting it all on you. That's the key thing. So yeah, that is definitely something I want to see, and especially the relationship between the two of them.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Martin Brundle and I think Bernie Eccleston as well, both of them hugely experienced people, and both of them said that they actually still have Verstappen as the favorite for the title, simply because he is the only one who is the clear number one in his team, and because he has the experience of knowing how to win a championship, what it takes, what you can do, what you can't do. This is something that, except for Lewis Hamilton, none of the other drivers in the top four teams know anything about. You know, Norris doesn't, Piastri doesn't, Russell doesn't, Leclerc doesn't, Antonelli doesn't. Hamilton is the only one who does. And I that is interesting as well, to see if Verstappen can scratch and claw his way to another title, despite, at least at the start of the season, not having a package that, in his own words, maybe he's downplaying it a bit as well, but in his own words says he shouldn't be contending for wins, at least at the start of the year.
I think when we did our chat, what's it called, the predictions for the season, you compared what you think you'll get from Verstappen to Fernando Alonso in 2012. If he wins the championship, it will be like the upgrade of Fernando Alonso in 2012. He will literally, I think last season for me, in a different way, I think 2022 was very impressive. I think it was one of the best seasons in Formula One history that he had. But I think 2023 was one of the most impressive seasons in Formula One history. The one where he broke nearly every record. But I think last season for me was his most impressive because of how he went about it, and not having the best car, having the third best car if you go off Constructors' Championship. And he still managed to win. If he does it this season, it will trump that. It will trump that so much, because we are all aware that car is not there. It looked horrible to drive in testing. They were still trying to figure out how to set it up. They were still putting flow-vis with hours before testing ended, while everyone else was doing race runs and everyone else was doing long runs, doing short runs, doing performance runs. Red Bull did the least laps of any team in testing. So they are so far behind. So if he still manages to overcome all that and win the championship and tie Michael Schumacher as the only people to win 5 straight, there's no stopping him.
At that point, we're going to have to start having some serious conversations.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Conversations
I agree.
Comfortable with.
I agree that last year, maybe not in my lifetime, but at least it's one of the most impressive titles in a very long time. It was reminiscent of Button's in 2009 in a way that he had the dominant car at the start of the year and then was just kind of defending his lead for the back half of the season. But even Button himself acknowledges that he was really nervous by the end of that year, and he was like, he couldn't, and he started making mistakes here and there, and Max did make a couple of mistakes here and there, but he had that. We've talked enough about it, but the way he won last year's title is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen anyone do. If Alonso would have won in 2012, that would have been better, but he didn't. So it's not. But I mean, Max just makes any car, 8/10 quicker than it should be. So he is the closest thing to a cheat code you can have in F1, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you are right to say that. Martin Brundle and Bernie to say that he probably is the favorite. I find it hard to say that anybody other than Max Verstappen is the favorite. The only reason I would say Lando Norris is the favorite is because I expect that car to be significantly better. But if I had to pick, I would still say Max Verstappen over anybody because he's Max Verstappen and he will probably find a way. But like you said, the teammate thing is a big thing. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton will probably take points off each other. Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris will probably take points off each other. And Liam Lawson probably will not take points off Max Verstappen very often. So he's just going to benefit from that bit.
No, absolutely. I agree. No, Lawson was significantly slower in testing in the long runs than Max. He's got some catching up to do. I don't think Max will be too constricted or bothered in a way by Lawson treading on his toes, unlike the other teams. So, yeah.
Well, what other things do you think people should look out for this season?
I think people should look out for how teams start the year, and teams that start the year badly, how quickly they're going to pull the plug and just say, all right, we're just going all in on 2026. It seems like Aston Martin have already done that, which is very ill-advised, I think. But some people have them as low down as the 8th or the 9th best team right now after Bahrain testing, which is shocking. You know, a team that's been comfortably 5th in the last 2 seasons, that they've had such a drop off. Yes, they've had massive restructuring in their management. Andy Cowell's come in. He has kind of restructured everything. He was appointed as CEO, made himself team principal as well. Adrian Newey has started work there not even 2 weeks ago. Those are 2 massive changes they've already made. Enrico Cardila is due to come in, but won't come in now until July because he has this lawsuit with Ferrari now. There you go. But that is something to look out for. Every team, are they, you know, it's such an interesting dilemma, isn't it? Are you going to throw away this year to bet on the future, or are you going to go all in on this year and maybe not be as good in 2026? But they're not mutually exclusive either. You can set yourself up this year for next year. And I think something you always have to take into account is that even if you're good now, it doesn't guarantee you're good in the future. So if you're, for example, if you're Alpine now and you're comfortably 5th, it looks like they're the best of the rest behind the top 4 teams, shall we say, with only Williams kind of in their ballpark. That is something, you know, even if you put all your resources towards next year, that doesn't guarantee you'll be there again. There is something to be said about staying in the here and the now, not getting ahead of yourself. And that is probably the most interesting thing in the back half of the grid, as well as with the top teams. You know, say Red Bull or Ferrari or McLaren or Mercedes have a bad start to the season. Do they just say, solid, we're just going to go full out for next season, write this one off, we go again next year? Or are you going to stick with it? And when is that call made? When does each team relative to each other make that call? That is the most fascinating dilemma for every team manager and team principal to lose sleep over this year.
No, this is one of my favorite things to look forward to in this season. It's the kind of how the grid will be so bunched up in some parts, and then towards the back, it will be just some people so far off it because of the kind of looking towards 2026. And also, I think one element of it, which will definitely play a role in it, is the fact that a lot of people will be looking at wind tunnel time allocation as well as that. I mean, the benefit of being bad, it's like a draft lottery in the NBA. So if you're further back, you get more wind tunnel time, which then would assist you in a chance in development for the new regulations. But I do agree with you. There is no guarantee that you will be good if you are bad this year. If you focus all your energy on next season, that doesn't mean you're going to be focusing it correctly. And there's also the element of having stakeholders to please. You need to perform because you have people that are investing in your company, in your team, and they want to see results. You also have drivers to please. I think of Gabby Bortoleto, who looks like he's probably driving the worst car on the grid. And he is, in my opinion, the most promising rookie that's coming in this season. So someone like that, who Audi are trying to bank their future on, you're going to need to keep him happy, because I think that is a guy that could potentially become a future world champion. And you're needing to convince that person to stay. So if you are throwing away 1 year of their Formula One career, how happy are they going to be? Because I don't think it's going to be very. Aston Martin throwing it away is crazy. I think that doesn't surprise me. With the amount of changes they've had in the backroom staff, it doesn't surprise me that they are struggling. They have a lot of like big names, big changes coming in. I think Newey probably should focus on the 26 project. But there's always been this talk around Lawrence Stroll around, oh, we need to build a champion. We need to win. We need to do this. We need to do that. And he's trying to put all the blocks in place for it. But since the start of the 2023 season, they have just been going like this. Yeah. And there's been no reason to believe that they are going like this apart from these names who we've not seen the benefits come from them yet. So it's a lot of this is going to happen, but at some point they're going to need to show that what they're doing and all this money that they're spending does actually help them.
Yeah, I mean, Andy Cowell at Mercedes, which, you know, he left over 3 years ago now, I think. Andy Cowell was touted as one of the main reasons why Mercedes were as dominant as they were, because he has apparently, you know, I can't testify from first-hand experience, but apparently he is a genius at putting everyone in the right place and making everyone sort of be as efficient and as good as at their job as possible. And he has already tweaked things around. Mike Crack is no longer team principal, but he is still in the team. He is pushing people forward, people backward, laterally. Apparently, they've made the structure of the company so that there's a lot less red tape to go through if you want to talk to one department to the next, to make things more fluid, especially for someone like Adrian Newey to be as efficient as possible. So let's see. But again, it's not plug and play. This is going to take time. And for them to, I mean, let's see if they do throw away the season, because the last 2 years, they started really well and then just could not get a hold of the car development wise. So if they're already bad at the start of this season, let's see what that means at the end of the year, if they can finally figure it out, or if they're just going to be a back of the midfield team now, which, you know, someone like Fernando Alonso will not appreciate. Yeah,
and also they need to show Yuki Tsunoda 2026 that he'll have a good car. New management, I'm telling you, it could happen.
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't mind the prediction. It's a good take. It's a good take. I don't mind it.
Nice. Well, thank you very much. That's been the narratives part of the preview, guys. Next up, we're going to be talking rookies. So I'm now joined by Sam Cook, another member of the GP fans community, and we are going to be talking about this season's rookies. There are only about 3 actual rookies. There's a couple of people that are masquerading as rookies, but we're going to be talking about all of them. First of all, do you think that some of these guys should be called rookies? The guys that aren't rookies, for example, are Bearmans, are Doohans.
I mean, I see Bearman as a rookie because he's only raced in 3 races. But someone like Lawson, I mean, he's pretty much had not a whole season, but he's had 2 half seasons. Anyway, he's had like 11 Grand Prix, and so I feel like he is too experienced to be called officially a rookie. But Bearman, I mean, he just misses out. It's 2 Grand Prix, isn't it? You need to have raced in 2 Grand Prix to not be a rookie. So he's just over that limit. So I think we're okay calling him a rookie.
Yeah, I mean, for all of them, it's their first full season in Formula One. And that in itself is an experience, starting on 0 points with everybody and then going on to then do the entire season. That's going to be the difficult part for them. But there's going to be highs and there's going to be lows. So do you want to tell me a bit about some of the rookies? We were just talking about Bortoleto before we got into this. He's the most kind of accomplished before Formula One of those rookies, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Antonelli is probably the biggest name going into the season just because of the amount of hype that's been around him and like the fact he's replacing Lewis Hamilton as well at a big team. But Bortoleto is obviously the F2 champion. So he's got the most amount of standing, I'd say, in, you know, amongst motorsport people in general. He's probably the standout star because he's the F2 champion. And it's exciting to have him on the grid because F2 champions have found it difficult in recent years to get themselves onto the grid. So to have the reigning F2 champion starting the season in F1 is really exciting. And I think he probably has the most potential to go on to become a world champion. it's unlikely he's going to do that at Sauber. Although who knows, like with them obviously going into Audi from next year, you never know. They might really be a real force within the next few years. But yeah, I think I can see him having a real impact on the sport in years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. If there's one person that I think could be a quote unquote generational driver, a lot of people talk about Kimi Antonelli being that potentially generational driver. I do think part of that is because he's the younger of the two, but Bortoleto is one of only a few people that have won F3 and F2 in their rookie seasons: Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, George Russell, and him. So that clearly shows the talent that he has, and he's one of those drivers that is so cool, calm, and collected. He's quite literally the polar opposite of his title rival last year in F2, Isack Hadjar, who was the hot-headed kind of maybe sometimes loses his marbles a bit too much. I'm sure everybody's seen the Hadjar famous Monaco rant. So that's what you get from him. Bortoleto is the completely different. But, tell me about Hadjar while we're there, because he is another legitimate rookie.
I'd say he's the perfect partner for Tsunoda in that sense with his team radio shenanigans. But he looks really talented as well. And I mean, it's a shame for Yuki now, because I feel like the amount of young talent that have come alongside him and have gone on to better things. And I think Hadjar might be the next one. I feel like he is more likely to, let's say Lawson has a shocker at Red Bull and is replaced, before the end of the season. I think Hadjar could easily outperform Tsunoda and be the next candidate for the Red Bull seat. He, just the way he conducts himself, obviously his team radio rants, he might need to cut that out a little bit, because that's probably what's hampered Tsunoda. But I can see him, we talk about the talent of Bortoleto being the F2 champion. Hadjar came so close to winning that title, and it was only his stall on the grid in the last race weekend. That kind of ruins his chances. And so I think we should be talking about him in a similar vein to how we talk about Bortoleto. He seems to be a really good talent.
Yeah, I mean, his first season in F2 was a bit of a disappointment, but there were some issues. It wasn't just him. There was several things that went wrong. But last season, I just showed that when he's on it. He's quick, he's talented. And I mean, sometimes you ask people to kind of remove that fieriness from them, but also for some people, that fieriness is what makes them what they are and what makes them able to be so talented. I talk too much about Yuki, I reckon, on GP Fans, but I do want to say that I think that for him, the door may be shut, because I really do think that what they're going to do is they're probably going to be more patient with Lawson than they have ever been with anybody. And I think they're probably going to have Hadjar have this season. Yuki's got new management. Yuki goes somewhere else next season, whether that is a role on the grid or as a reserve driver. I hope it's on the grid, because Yuki's way too good to be a reserve driver. And then they bring in Arvid Lindblad, and he's a rookie. And then that's their two drivers at Racing Bulls. But let's go on to Kimi Antonelli, because he is the one big name. Boatload of potential. A lot of people branding him this Max Verstappen-esque prospect. If he wins, I think it's in the first 3 races or 2 races, he will break the record for youngest, or get I think it's youngest race winner. But he has quite a short amount of time to do it.
Right. Okay.
So, I mean, Mercedes look good in testing.
Yeah, they did.
What are we expecting from Kimi Antonelli this season? Are people putting too much pressure on him, or do you think that he will live up to the pressure?
I mean, I've seen a lot of people suggest that he could beat Russell, and I know Russell maybe isn't seen as a Leclerc or a Verstappen, but Russell is a very, very good driver, and he's got that experience behind him now, experience of being in a big team as well for 3-4 seasons now. Antonelli's heading straight into that team. I think if he can even get close to Russell within the season, I think he's done a really good job, because you can see him being a long way off in the Australian Grand Prix qualifying, especially with how good Russell is in qualifying. And then I feel like if by the end of the season he's got that down to 2 or 3 tenths, then I think we know that he's probably going to be their long-term driver. if he's really struggling, then I know there's been a few whisperings of Wolf wanting to potentially get Verstappen in the door within the next couple of years. Would they maybe think about that a lot more seriously if Antonelli is really doing poorly? Maybe, but I don't know. I think if he can even get close to Russell within his first season, that would be a really solid first season. A race victory, you never know. It could happen. Mercedes seems to be quite strong, as you said, in testing. So if he could get his first race victory under his belt, then yeah, I think he'll be a real threat in the future for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, also George Russell is out of contract at the end of this season. All we hear about the talk into 2026 is the Mercedes engine. So there's that element there. And if Verstappen, all he wants to do, which it seems is win, maybe he ends up there at some point, and maybe they decide that Kimi Antonelli was good enough for them to lead their future in to be their prospect for the future, and they want Max Verstappen right now to partner him. I don't know how that dynamic would work. We'll talk about dynamics later, but there's one person that does have, I mean, he's raced one race and already has a lot of pressure on him. That's Jack Doohan, another rookie. Well, he actually is a technically rookie because he's only done one race. So Jack Doohan already has pressure on him. How do you see his season going? And do you want to explain why there's pressure on him?
Yeah, he's immediately under pressure as soon as he steps in the race car in Australia, because they've obviously signed Colapinto into the reserve driver role on a 3-year reserve driver contract as well, which makes you think he's definitely planning on being in that seat at some point. Yeah. And a lot of talk has been that it will be this season, and that Doohan's just kind of there to make up the numbers. he's gonna start the season, and I guess if he does really, really well, then there's no need to replace him. But I think even if he's just a little bit away from Pierre Gasly, which he easily could be, because Gasly is obviously a really experienced driver, then I think I can see Colapinto coming in pretty quickly, maybe even within the first 10 races or so. He's obviously a real big talent, Colapinto, and he proved it at Williams. The end of his season last year maybe wasn't so great.
It was like this, wasn't it? Comes in, and just too many crashes.
But you could see the talent there, and I think that's why Alpine have obviously gone all out to go and get him. But yeah, Doohan's under immediate pressure for sure.
I think the interesting thing about the Doohan talk is, before going into this season, I thought there was a chance that Doohan would be 21st out of 20 people in the standings, because I thought he would get replaced, because I thought Alpine wouldn't have a good car. Alpine looked to be with like Williams in terms of that. After the big four, you have like the Williams, Alpine, Aston Martin a bit further back on that. So I think there is a chance that he's actually in a pretty decent car, which means he looks a lot better than what we were expecting of him. But then, like you said, if he is performing better than we expected of him, but Pierre Gasly is still absolutely miles ahead of him because the car is better, they will compare him to Pierre. And if he isn't anywhere near him, that is an easy excuse for, bear in mind, Flavio Briatore wasn't part of the Alpine kind of setup when they even made Jack Doohan the reserve driver. He's not their choice for driver. He's only been chosen because he beat Mick Schumacher in a testing session. That's the reason he got the role. So they're probably looking for an out. So if he gives them any out, the only real way he can stop himself from not getting demoted is by either beating Gasly or being so close that they can't be like, no, we need someone to improve.
He needs to give them a reason not to sack him, basically, which is a lot of pressure, because he has only done one race and he will be behind Gasly most likely, unless Gasly's having a shocking season. So there's got to be something there, with how, like you say, Alpine are looking a lot better than we maybe expected them to. So maybe that is even regular points finishes that he needs to kind of keep his seat there, regularly coming in 8th, 9th, 10th. But yeah, I think it's going to be really difficult for him.
Okay. And then what about the Brits, the Bear, Ollie Bearman? He's got an interesting kind of partnership with Esteban Ocon. I think that's going to be a cool thing to see. He's had quite a bit of experience under his belt. He had a very good race at Saudi Arabia for Ferrari. And then was it Baku? Yeah, Baku again. He got Baku. And then the one where I always say every time I saw him at Brazil, he was off track.
Oh, Brazil, yeah.
But everybody was off track, so I won't be that mean to him because it's fair play. No one could really see. But it was a bit of a hard weekend for him at Brazil. What do you expect from Ollie? I think he's a brilliant driver, but I do think he had a bit of a tough F2 season last year, but his team was struggling early on.
He did have, his team was struggling. And I think, really, I do think he's actually the least under pressure of all of the, as we're describing them as rookies this season, just simply because we already know he's got the talent. He's kind of already proven that. And for Haas, there's not too much expectations being placed on him. Ocon, you know, like the same with Gasly and Doohan, like Ocon will finish ahead of Bearman most likely this season. And it's just about getting his first full-time season in. And then from there, we'll see the best of him. I think when new regulations come into sport, obviously in 2026, I think that's when you'll properly start being able to judge Bearman. I think this season is just going to all be about getting as many races under his belt as possible. But he's a brilliant talent. I think one day he probably will be Hamilton's replacement at Ferrari. When Hamilton decides to retire, I think it'll be Bearman being put into that seat alongside Leclerc. He looked the real deal in Saudi Arabia, and like you say, Brazil was a difficult race for him, but he was really honest about that. Like, he still scored points, didn't he? He still came 10th. Yeah,
he did. Yeah,
but even he was like really honest about how he didn't necessarily deserve that point. And so that shows a good mindset. It shows that he knows how many mistakes he made. When he goes back there this season, you know, hopefully he would have learned from that. And yeah, it's just about getting as many races in as possible for him, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I actually thought before the Hamilton part of signing, before Hamilton was announced as Ferrari's driver, I always thought the goal that would be when they were talking to Sainz about a new contract, Sainz for maybe like another 3-year contract or 2-year contract. At the end of that contract, you get Ollie Bearman. But now he's at the mercy of Lewis Hamilton. How long does Lewis Hamilton want to drive? Because Lewis Hamilton will be ending his career at Ferrari, and then it's almost like a bridge to Ollie Bearman. At that point, Charles Leclerc will probably be in his 30s, experienced, maybe a world champion. And Ollie Bearman will be the guy entering his prime. And Ferrari do seem set on that kid being the person. The only reason I could imagine that not happening is if some reason Antonelli becomes available and Ferrari are going to pick the Italian. Like if that was a thing, if that happened, I could understand that. But that's the only way I see Ollie Bearman not ending up at Ferrari, because if you look at Ferrari's kind of academy right now, there's not much coming through that what's it called, challenge Bearman. And then there's one more, the guy that has raced half a season but goes up against the 4-time defending champion, looking to become the only person apart from Michael Schumacher to win 5 straight championships, and that's Lawson. We talk about Doohan having pressure. Is there anything like Red Bull pressure? Is there anything like the pressure of going up against Max Verstappen?
No, I mean, it's the hardest job in the sport, isn't it? Really, going up against Verstappen. You know, we've all seen what's happened to people like Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly, Daniel Kvyat, Sergio Perez. Wait, not Kvyat actually.
Kvyat, he took Kvyat's job. He took Kvyat's job. Yeah.
But it's a very difficult thing to go up against Max Verstappen. But I think, as you were saying before, I think out of all Red Bull drivers going into that seat alongside Verstappen, I think Lawson's got the least pressure on him, simply because I don't think Red Bull are expecting to be world champions this season. And I don't think they're necessarily even expecting Verstappen to win the Drivers' Championship as he did obviously last year. And so I can just see Lawson ticking along nicely. You know, maybe, obviously it'll be a long way off Max, but I think as long as he's getting regular points finishes and keeping them maybe third or fourth in the Constructors' Championship, I think they'll be happy with that, and they won't be looking to move him on. I think the only time they'll start maybe having a problem is if he's doing similar to what Perez was doing last year, Q1 exits all the time, just no confidence, clearly almost putting it in the wall, clearly almost like regressing based on where he was at the start of the season. I think that's the only way that Lawson will be under pressure. I think if he's just consistently putting it 8th, 7th, 6th, I don't think they'll see any need to change him. Unless a driver becomes available, of course, like Russell, who we know is out of contract end of 2025. But no, I think he'll be okay this first season.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And Red Bull, it's so funny because during the winter, the talk out of Red Bull was we're 3 months ahead of schedule. Then you come to testing and with an hour left, they're doing Flovis tests when everybody else is just doing performance runs. And it looks like they're actually 3 months behind schedule. And they actually turn up with a car that looks exactly like their last year's car. And it's like, okay, well, you guys asleep all winter. So yeah, they do look a bit behind schedule. They look like they're going to be on the back foot at the start of this season, completely opposite to what they looked like last year, where they looked miles ahead of everybody. 1-2s at the first 2 races of the season. So yeah, that's our rookies. I think the dynamics are very key. I think with Doohan and Gasly, you've got a very experienced driver and a guy trying to prove himself. So that's under a significant amount of pressure. Lawson, Verstappen, we just spoke about, it's kind of similar. And like there is a very clear gap between the two of them in terms of talent. Lawson doesn't have the typical pressure of a Red Bull driver. Doohan seems to have that. Hadjar and Tsunoda, I feel like they might be the best of buddies, honestly. They might actually be the best of buddies. I've already started seeing them make TikToks together. Like, I've already started seeing those.
It does seem like the Gasly-Tsunoda partnership again.
Yeah, you know, I genuinely think they're going to get along very well. Yeah. But I do think that Tsunoda is in a bit of like an era where he is now not trying to do... He shouldn't be going into this season trying to do what's best for the team. He needs to go into this season to try and prove to other teams. Like this season is an audition for his future in a Formula 1. So I think he needs to go in there and absolutely smash Hadjar. That's what he needs to do. Bearman and Ocon, I do think once again there is probably a bit of a gap. Bearman might become better than Ocon eventually, but Ocon's a race winner, very good driver. And very experienced. And then Antonelli, Russell, I'm very interested to see how Russell takes up that the mentorship role, if he does even want to do that. That's the thing I'm very curious about, to see how that comes about.
Back to Tsunoda, like you're saying, like this is his audition. It kind of feels like he's in a similar position to Sainz last year, when Sainz obviously knew that he was being displaced by Ferrari, and it was all about how high up the grid are you going to be next year? What team are going to want you? And I mean, he's obviously ended up kind of settling for Williams, but his performances were good enough for him to get that Red Bull seat, really. He won 2 Grand Prix last year. He was really close to Leclerc for a lot of the season. And like you say, I feel like for Tsunoda, it's exactly that. It's trying to prove to everybody else that you're as good as he obviously thinks he is. He's got the confidence. He's just got to prove to the likes of Aston Martin that he could be the man to take them into the future to a world championship one day. And the only way you can do that is by thrashing Hadjar, really.
Tsunoda to Aston Martin, it's going to happen. I've been calling it for so long now that if it doesn't happen, I'm cooked.
It makes sense. It does make sense with Honda, but also with the fact that Stroll, it's just not good enough. Yeah, he's just not good enough. I hate to be the guy to say it. He's just not. And Tsunoda is much better. So I'm not going to do this. I could have gone around. I'm just going to carry on. If there is a future in which Tsunoda is not on the grid in 2026 and Lance Stroll is F1,
You're finished. You're finished. That's been our rookie
Big
segment.
claim.
You know what I'm saying? Thank you very much for joining me, Sam. Well, that has been our preview. For those of you that have enjoyed, subscribe for more videos on this channel. We're going to be doing plenty of stuff like this across the season. It's been a pleasure, and enjoy Albert Park. For those especially in the UK waking up at 4 a.m. like us to watch it. Peace.